So welcome, Andy. Thanks for joining us today. This is just obviously a great opportunity to get a bit of an insight into your experience and development as an official in the sport of triathlon. So I suppose the first thing is, let's take a step back, a number of years for yourself, and well, firstly, where do you live now? Where have you lived, and how did you firstly get involved as an official in triathlon?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. I guess triathlon. So I currently live in Hillsville, which is about 60 k's outside of Melbourne's CBD, and it's on the fringe between the bush and the city. Mm-hmm. I first came into contact with triathlon. I've always loved running, and I guess the Weet-Bix triathlon in when I lived in New Zealand was my first interaction with the triathlon sport.
This is as a kid or as an adult?
As an adult.
Oh, as an adult. Okay. You look pretty young there, Andy. So yeah.
Yeah. So I look. It was about 2000. I was living in the South Island, New Zealand, and I had two young boys, and I took them to the local Weet-Bix triathlon. And I've always been involved in sport. Like we played rugby in New Zealand, and we were surfing all around the place, swimming, and I love running. So I did a lot of half marathons and 10K races through the bush. Anyway, so we saw this Weet-Bix on, so we said, right, this sounds like fun, bit of a swim, bit of a run, a bit of a ride. And we went off from that, and the boys really enjoyed it. And I guess we probably didn't get back into it until about 4 years later after that. We used to do the annual Weet-Bixes, but that was about it. But the boys always loved swimming, so they belonged to a swim club, and they were running and just playing sport. Anyway, we came back to Australia, and we lived in a town called Alexandra, which is about a couple of hours in the Victorian countryside from Melbourne. And we started, and my oldest son started being interested in being involved in triathlon. So I used to drive him down to Melbourne to compete in the races, and then we joined the Casey Cardinia Triathlon Club, and I was involved in the coaching, and eventually ended up as the president there for a couple of years. And in 2009, we moved down to Hillsville, and I suddenly thought, both the boys were involved in triathlon there, and I sort of said I was going to all these triathlon events, and I'd like to give something back to the sport. So I made the decision then to become a technical official, and it was initially just to go to be part of the race rather than being a spectator, just watching the boys run. But then I basically got, the family dragged me into it, the triathlon family. They're such a great bunch of people, the technical officials, and it was a side of the sport that I hadn't been fully aware of. And as I got more involved, I made some good friends. Brian Hinton certainly was a great mentor.
Can you remember your first course you did when all those years ago, and who taught it?
Yes, I think it was Sally Ham.
Okay.
And she was taking the courses, and it was pretty basic. You turned up, and they ran through a pretty basic set of rules, and it was more Sally sort of got into the philosophy of it in terms of the safe, fair, and fun side of things, and then it was in terms of and then I went to my first race, which I probably can't remember very much, but I felt very comfortable because I've always been involved in managing a lot of staff and being part of a team, and I immediately felt welcomed into the triathlon technical team, and felt very comfortable. I like being part of a team, and it was a lot of support there, and also the athletes generally are pretty good people and fair-minded. I always remembered one of the TOs that I brought into the sport a couple of years later. He was an AFL umpire, and he could not get over the politeness and the way the athletes treated the technical officials.
Yep.
He said it was fantastic after what he'd been, abuse, some of the abuse he'd suffered from various athletes and parents, but it was such a different atmosphere in triathlon.
Why do you think that is? That it is that different atmosphere that, there's a bit more, you call it mutual respect or whatever that happens between athletes and officials in triathlon?
Well, I think a lot of the athletes, to some extent, were on personal journeys, if you like. And it's about, for the top lot, it's about winning and getting ahead. But for the majority of athletes, it's about achievement and getting there. And they're we're there to support them. And I think a lot of it's due to the attitude that the Triathlon Australia encourages is safe, fair, and fun. At the age group level, it's important that the athlete enjoys the experience as well as, and we're there to make sure they're safe and it's fair. And I don't know, it just seems like they're a lot more respectful, and respect goes both ways. I respect them for what they're trying to achieve, and they seem to sense that in the respect of what we're trying to do. We're volunteers. We're doing it because we really enjoy the sport and the interaction with the race officials and the athletes.
Yeah. Andy, you've put a fair commitment into the program over the years, and I suppose the big question often people ask, they start out and they might just be doing one or two races. I don't necessarily see myself as Andy McGuire doing 15 races this season. But why do you do it? What do you get out of doing it, and why do you keep turning up?
Well, I guess I'm at a stage now where I've been involved in quite a lot of years now, and I've officiated at reasonably senior levels, and I really enjoy bringing new technical officials into the family. It's like a family, and I get a lot of satisfaction. Not necessarily the actual role, getting the roles, officiating at referee level. I really enjoy the mentoring part of it at the moment, and just passing on my thoughts and experiences to the newer technical officials coming on, and also. I never get tired of. You get to know athletes and the race directors, and you do develop friendships. And look, it's not every weekend. It's probably there's a couple of weekends in a row, and also it's a variety. Like I like to travel around, and I've officiated other areas in Australia, and I've made good friends over there. So. Yeah, I've got the time to devote to it. My children have left home, and they're doing other things besides triathlon. It's funny, they're not doing triathlon at the moment, but I'm still here. So.
Yeah, it's funny. You're not the only. I know a number of people who've been brought in and become officials because of their kids that are actually doing the sport, and then their kids move on, but they're still involved. And quite a lot. Just going back to some of those early days. I mean, you've said a lot in terms of you enjoy the mentorship side of things. Was that something you had a positive experience of in your early days, where someone mentored you or supported you?
I guess I do. I take that. I've always like Brian in Victoria has been particularly helpful in terms of just guiding me through the local competitions and then introducing me to the major competitions in the other states. And when I've gone to the other states, I've really made some wonderful friends and contacts in terms of the senior officials there who officiate at major races, and Michael Thompson, to name a couple, and there's a couple of others out there that I love catching up with, and really just drawing on their experience, because You know, when you get to a little bit of a senior level, now and again it gets a bit serious, and you've just got to maintain a perspective and just draw on the advice and experience that's available. So I guess, yeah, I've made some really wonderful contacts, like Tony from New Zealand. He used to be the TD in the Devonport race. I've done that Devonport race for 6 years now, 7 years now, and Tony, what's his name? I've forgotten his name.
Tony Sangster.
Yeah, Tony Sangster. He's been fantastic in terms of just developing that race from I think an Oceania race, and this year was this year it was a World Series race, Olympic qualifier. It's just amazing to see how a little race like that develops, and if you stick with it and all the different people that come to it, it's one of my favourite events of the year. I try not to miss it because there's all sorts of people turn up. There's never enough people, so you do lots of different roles. And then the paras, well, they're inspirational, a lot of those people. And certainly enjoy that part of it.
Yeah. Is that, I mean, you're talking to the paras, and often when I talk to people about this, paras tends to be one of the, is that sort of the paras one of the more inspiring things you've experienced in triathlon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember one of the early years when because the para sport's been developing, and pretty much since I began my journey in triathlon, the para sport has developed from nothing to what it is today, an Olympic sport. And I always remember we were down Devonport, and there was about a 3 to 4 foot swell coming in, big surf coming in the beach there. And I was looking at some of the lady wheelchair athletes. I think Emily Tapp was one of them. And when they went out, I just could not figure out how they would get around. And they went into the surf, and even looking at their faces before the race, you could see that they were certainly concerned, and it was all out. But this little girl, Emily Tabb, she went out there, and I thought, I didn't think she'd make it, and then she went around and made it, and came into the beach, and all the boys carried her in and plonked her on the wheelchair, and off she went. And I thought, that's just an amazing example of the human spirit. It's just amazing. It's very, very humbling. But people do races for all sorts of things. I remember I did a race in Busselton, and that was the year where we had a large fish off the wharf, and we had to pull everyone off and put them onto the wharf, and then start the race again at the bike. And then the bike started, and then they had the bushfire, so they had to shorten the course. And then we had 40 degrees. All of a sudden, it got incredibly hot in the transition. So I ended up in transition, just helping people through that were suffering a little bit with heat stress and stuff. And I remember speaking to this lady, and she was so upset that she was feeling so crook, and she still had the run to go. And she said to me, I'm running for my dad. He died about 4 months ago. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What people do.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, sport's one of those things that does bring out often that, that really sort of humanistic side of people, certainly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to share it with them and help them actually achieve those goals.
Yeah. So, it's like we're witness to a lot of things that, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily see. So, thanks. Yeah, for sharing that story. That's great. I suppose going back to your own sort of career, and, you can go back as far as like, hey, when you were first TD or another, can you sort of tell us about a difficult situation that you sort of found yourself in? It may have been through something you did, maybe in something just happened. How you dealt with it, and as a bit of a sort of learning experience for perhaps some of the officials watching this.
Yeah, well, you do get one, but one sticks in my mind, and mainly because it led to an unsatisfactory conclusion for the athlete. But I certainly looked to put in things and learn from the experience so it wouldn't happen again. And then I was a TD in an Australian championship, and it was in a different state. So when you go, I was race referee, not TD, race referee. And when you go to a different state, I always used to ask, what are the general rules? What are the main issues here? And the issue one of the local rules that they used to do in that race or in that state was to, I guess, if you weren't wearing the right sort of speed suit, and it was a very minor technical point. If the speed suit went over didn't go over your shoulder, it was legal, and if it did go over your shoulder, it was illegal. But if you were running Ironman rules, it was legal. Anyway, I made the announcement. So it wasn't, I guess, anyway, at the end of the day, we had 6 athletes that were DQ'd for that. And I made a decision. I said, what do you normally do when people break this rule? And they said, oh, DQ them. So I just accepted that at face value. And anyway, we ended up DQing about 6 athletes, and one of them won by about 3 minutes, and it was an Australian championship. And the lady was extremely upset. And I guess we stuffed, at the end of the day, we stuffed up well, she ran out of time to appeal or lodge a protest. And it was an unsatisfactory outcome for both me from the athlete. And when I went back over it, there was a number of things I learned from it. I actually wrote up an investigation on the process myself and sent it into Triathlon Australia for them
what would you say, like the top 3, the big 3 things you could take away, and so next time you wouldn't necessarily the same if incident may not occur, or you may deal with it better? What would be the top 3?
Okay. Well, the first one is you never have to rush a decision. Mm-hmm. I had a whole lot of very experienced technical officials there I could have consulted with. Mm-hmm. The second thing I think to learn with this is when you're implementing a rule, you need to say how is the athlete to know that rule? Because there's a lot of age group championships out there, and we'll get appeals and all sorts of things. But the rules that we enforce, the athlete's got to have a fair chance of actually knowing what the rule is. So it's either in the pre-race briefing, which this wasn't. So you can say, yes, it was in the pre-race briefing, you should have known. And I think the third thing is the actual, I guess, the ruling. How much of an advantage? The third thing is, that's not right. The third thing is go through the process and check that your TD and your senior technical officials understand the protester process. So if they're going to protest, everyone says, these are my roles, because we certainly got a little bit confused with who did what role. A TD has a different role from a race official in the protest process. So what I do now before races, most races now, is I speak to the TD, and I speak to and the race referee, and I say, okay, is this the process we're going to follow if an athlete is not happy with the decision? We both agree on what our roles are, and then you begin the race with that understanding. So they're the 3 things.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Andy. I think you sort of encapsulated towards the end of really it's often about, you won't necessarily be faced with that exact experience again, but what sort of overarching sort of things can you take forward into the next event? So that we all make mistakes. Hey, hand up anyone who's ever made a mistake at a triathlon. We've made a few and we've learned from them. But I think it's like especially what process you can apply at the next race, because it won't be identical to what you've experienced, but you've got that process behind it. I mean, obviously, they're fairly sort of challenging sort of things you often have to experience. How do you feel triathlons maybe helped you in other areas outside of this? I mean, just in terms of your work and dealing with you say you manage people, has this sort of your officiating experience reflected in your work at all?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the things that when I did the Australian Technical Official, we did a bit of a leadership course in terms of looking at my style, if you like, what areas that I could work on. I think working in a team is certainly very similar to what I do at work. I rely on people. I don't do everything. I delegate tasks to people. And also give them the chance to give me feedback about how I'm assisting them or impacting them on how well they do their job. I certainly, in terms of some of the disciplines, doing the review, how things went, what we can learn. I think that's a standard life skill that you can apply at home and at work. And I think the philosophies of triathlon too. We start meetings. I'm also a member of the Triathlon Victoria Technical Committee, and we start meetings off looking at the values of triathlon. And I think it's, when things are tough, I always remember someone at work said to me, I remember someone said they were working in the Shell oil company. They had that oil platform pouring oil into the Gulf of Mexico, and everyone was just panicking and saying, "Well, what do we do?" And the chief CEO, he says, in these situations, you go back to your value, and then you work from there. Even now, as we go through this coronavirus thing, we go back to our values. It's about respect. It's about achievement. What we can do. It's about just being safe. Those values. If you start with those values, then your actions are dictated by what your values are.
That's really valuable. Thanks, Andy. No, I mean, we often don't know how these sort of things reflect, I suppose, around sort of people's lives and what it does. I suppose what's your sort of best experience or highlight from your sort of career as an official so far, do you think?
Well, man, I've had quite a few, I suppose, but I guess the World Championship in the Gold Coast is an obvious highlight of a technical officiating, and also
why particular that one? What stood out for you in terms of your experience at that event?
I think the experience in terms of that's how when you have all the resources and everything, and that's how you would run it. Like I was in your team, Michael, and we ran that swim section of, I think, 6 triathlons we did out of there, and all the different age groups, and we had a really tight team there. And it was, I think we had one person from Malaysia, I think it was. And,
that's right. And Sue Scott from WA.
Sue Scott from WA, and then you and myself. And, we were running that a part of the whole team. I mean, they had 4 technical officials, I think, for all the different races.
4 technical delegates,
technical delegates, I think. They had 2 race referees, and I think there was about 80 countries. Was there 80 countries?
There was a lot of countries. Yeah, a lot of officials from different countries too.
Yeah, over 100 technical officials.
Yeah,
and it was just and it was over 6. It was over about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah,
and just mixing with them and interacting them and going through the briefings and the pre-race stuff. It's pretty incredible. A large event like that, and being part of that, and at the end of the day, we ended up with some world champions, and we had some fantastic races, and a lot of, and we had that the nation. I guess that was, the highlight. I mean, the most interesting one I've been to is probably I went across to a triathlon in Szechua in China.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it took a long time to get there, so it was flights and a couple of flights and a very long bus trip, and we finally arrived in the middle of somewhere in China, somewhere west of Shanghai, I think. The local officials there, it was World Cup.
Yep.
And the Chinese generally have the same team that travels around the country doing the officiating. And I think there was 2 people in a team of probably 30 that spoke English, and so we did a lot of sign language and things like that. And the local district, they actually had a parade of nations, and about 10,000 people came out and looked at all these cultural and they put on all these cultural displays of dancing and singing and all the local people, and just such a surreal experience, if you like. And then we got down to the race, and I think they put me into somewhere where I wouldn't have. Oh well, I think I was the interpreter for most of the European athletes, and we worked there. But there was some people that officiated Olympics, and all sorts of.
Yep.
And then you had the local population brushing all the leaves off the course, and yeah, and then we had interesting meals. So so there was all sorts of different food to taste. So thoroughly enjoyed it. And then we spent a couple of days in Nanjing, and had a good look at that before we went home. But yeah, that was probably one of the most interesting triathlons experiences I've had. And it was overseas. Yeah.
Was it purely the fact of, there's a language barrier, or it's just culturally, it was that obviously made it sort of so unique? I mean, I'm just sort of fascinated by what you're saying. It's just like you almost seemed overawed by all the different things that were going on.
Well, I guess the perception, I don't know what my perception was of China before I went, but after I came back, I certainly said, the people are just like us. They like to get out. They like to see the country. They like to take their families for picnics. And they're very friendly people. Back in Nanjing, I think there was no petrol vehicles in Nanjing. All the vehicles were electric, which made me very nervous crossing the road because I couldn't hear them coming. But,
like a really quiet tram in Melbourne, just a little bit smaller.
Yeah, that's right. But look, the technical officials there had the same sort of ethos in terms of making sure the race was fair, making sure that people had enjoyed the experience, and that went for the technical officials. So I sat there and we did hand signals, and they saw me inspecting the transition and the bikes, and they were the English-speaking technical officials passed on my observations. Such as they were, and they were very grateful that I had actually made the effort to come over and see what they do. So
that's fantastic.
It was great. Yeah.
I mean, they're two very unique experiences. Obviously, a world championship and then a World Cup in a foreign country. So it's great that you sort of had the opportunity to experience those couple of things. I suppose as we're in this sort of lockdown period, where we don't have any events on, and season was cut a little bit short. What do you if you look forward in the next year, 2 years, what are you most looking forward to when we get back to sort of officiating triathlon? Do you have any sort of thoughts in terms of things you'd like to go experience, another country, another sort of event?
Oh, look, one of the things triathlon's given me is the opportunity to travel. So it's mainly around Australia and the odd one overseas, but and I'd like to probably do more overseas. A triathlon, simply just to use that as an excuse to go overseas.
Yep.
But I think the main thing I'm looking forward to get back is just seeing people racing again, seeing people basically see what their training has allowed them to achieve. Triathlon's a very personal sport. I think everyone has got their own personal goals, and they've gone through had their own experiences. And I'm just looking forward to interacting with them and just seeing what they've been doing over the break. And everyone's been doing different things with these with the enforced break. And I watched Kane and Jordan's from 2XU's interview the other day, and they're certainly looking forward to getting back and just basically upholding the producing an experience for the Melbourne triathlon community. It's a pretty
No, certainly, and right through our conversation here, it's like a lot of things it's sort of commonly talked about. It's like the people. You spoke fondly of mentors in the past and your ability to be able to mentor people and the people. Would you say, being involved with people is one of the best things about being a technical official?
Yeah, but there's also an achievement of actually producing a race that that athletes enjoy, and gives them a fair result. And I think it's a production. Like, there's a lot of preliminary work goes into organising the race and liaising with the race directors, and also just setting up the expectations of the technical team, and also, in terms of how to apply the rules, assisting them where they need to assistance. I really enjoy that side of things. I've always had an ethos of giving back to the community. So I think I've been involved. I've volunteered all my life in various different sports, but certainly I've stuck with triathlon longer than most. Most of the assistance I've done in the past has gone through my children's ages. As they grow up, they get into different sports, and I move into supporting them. But I certainly do, coming from a lot of small towns, as I'm part of forestry, so I live in a lot of regional communities. A lot of that teaches you to give, to be part of the community, to give back to the community. And that's what I see triathlon epitomising, if you like, in terms of technical officiating.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. A really good way to sort of sum up your experience of triathlon and the triathlon world. So thanks again for your time today. It's been sort of great to chat about everything. And look forward to seeing you out there. Yeah,
no, me too, Michael. It's been good to, I guess, reach out and speak to someone in this coronavirus and sort of isolation thing, and actually just it's really nice to all that recollection I've been doing, actually. So
yeah,
good to talk about it.
Cheers. See you soon.